2, 1. Yeah, go.
Welcome back, everybody. We are into hour 19 of Inclusive Design 24. If you're tracking us on Twitter, the hashtag is ID24, and tweeting us is the best way to ask questions for our next presenter. I'm really happy to welcome Cynthia Shelly. Cynthia's been involved in the accessibility world for many years. She's been involved in all sorts of things from developing WCAG 2 to the ARIA specification and a great deal of the accessibility of HTML5. At the moment, she's working with Starbucks, and I'm really looking forward to her talk now, which is going to offer some really practical advice on getting quite a lot of usability testing done in a remarkably short space of time and getting some practical results out of the whole lot. So, Cynthia, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about usability at CSUN. I'm here with Carmen Moritz, who is one of the usability engineers here at Starbucks. Carmen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Carmen, and as Cynthia said, I'm a UX researcher here at Starbucks, and I actually don't have a lot of accessibility background, so this was my foray into the whole thing, so happy to be here.
Great. Okay, so the question we got the most in the booth is, Starbucks, what are you doing here? And people may be asking that about this presentation as well. And it turns out that people like buying coffee with their phone. And Starbucks, while we are a coffee company, has an extremely popular mobile app that people can use to buy coffee. And we wanted to make sure that that was accessible. And so we did 52 usability studies in 3 days at CSUN this March. 46 of those users were using VoiceOver, and 3 of them were deaf. So what gave us the idea that we might want to do this? Like, how did that happen? And we have a great team of designers and engineers. They're really solid, and I've been very happy with the quality of the people here since I came here. And we wanted to make sure that the work that they'd been doing to try and incorporate accessibility into the product had actually worked. So we spent a bunch of time thinking about how we might be able to do that. And why did we want to do that? Well, you might think that coffee is trivial and silly and just fun. But independence isn't. And being able to buy your own coffee without someone else doing it for you, without having to rely on anyone else, is actually kind of a big deal. So the goal for us was really to make it so that users who were using assistive technology could buy coffee just like anybody else, have the same great experience with our app that they have in our stores, and not have to rely on assistants to do that for them. So as I mentioned, I came here about 6 months ago, and my biggest goal was to really integrate accessibility into the Agile development process that Starbucks uses. And the big piece of that was really getting it so that the whole team is involved in accessibility. If it was just me across 3 different platforms and all of the rapid development that's happening here, there's just no way it would work. So I set out to really integrate accessibility into the whole development process. And I have a cycle diagram up here that will probably look pretty familiar to people who've done Agile development. Starting with design, and then usability, product management, engineering, and quality assurance. We integrated accessibility through the whole process. So one of the first things that we did when I got here was to sit down with the design team and really do some deep dives into what the user scenarios are around accessibility, how people use assistive technology, what's available in the different on the different platforms, and to iterate on some designs and dig in deep and try and design something that would be not just compliant, but great to use. And with product management, writing stories, understanding the user scenarios, writing up specs, making sure that we had strings for every one of the attributes that we needed in the different APIs, prioritizing bugs, running things through Scrum processes, et cetera. Engineering obviously has to implement everything and has to understand what the different what the APIs and capabilities are that they have on the different platforms. And QA really needs to understand what the expected behavior is. And some of that can be done in specs, but a lot of it is really working with them to make sure that they're conversant in the different assistive technologies on all the different platforms, and that they're able to tell when something is a bug. So again, we've been working pretty hard on integrating this through the whole process and through the whole team, but how are we going to integrate it into usability? So we started thinking about this. How are we going to be able to get usability data? We could do on-site studies, but that means that we're dealing with people who can get to Seattle and who are able to not only get to Seattle, but get to our offices. And that's pretty expensive, and it seems like it could introduce some bias based on location and capabilities and a lot of different things. We talked about partnering with local colleges and universities, and that to go to their location and be able to find more users, and that could work. But again, that's a small subset of our population, right? Everybody buys coffee. Starbucks is throughout the entire world, and Seattle is not exactly representative of the entire world. We thought about doing remote usability, which we do for a lot of our mainstream usability, but we weren't confident in the accessibility of the software that's used for doing remote usability, and we're like, well, what if we went where the users are? This was in January, and CSUN was coming up, and we knew that there would be thousands of users with a wide range of disabilities at CSUN. So we decided that we would make a pilgrimage to CSUN. It turns out that getting from Seattle to San Diego isn't that big a deal, and we brought a team of 5 people, and so this is our team. There's a photo up here of 4 of our 5 team members. Myself, I'm the technical product manager for accessibility. Carmen, who is a UX researcher. Kim is our content manager, who was responsible for writing all those strings that VoiceOver reads. And Chad is an iOS developer. And then we also had our equal opportunity employment compliance manager, Martha Lee, who's not in the picture. And she was in the booth about half the time. Okay, so we're at CSUN. We've got all these people. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So I will turn over to Carmen now, who will tell us about what our process was.
Hi. So I hadn't run tests specifically for accessibility before, but for what we wanted to test, this didn't seem like it would require anything different than what I normally do. So I approached it just like I would any other usability study. And in case it helps any of you who want to do something similar, I'll walk through some of the considerations that we had while we were planning the study next. So one of the first was, how much time should each test take? How long should it take? Well, these are unscheduled, so we wanted to respect people's time, especially when they come by us, our booth, and keep it short. So about 5 to 10 minutes for sessions in the booth. And then we had an idea. Well, that's really short. So, would some people be willing to meet us in the evening for some longer sessions, maybe 20 to 30 minutes? So let's try it. So Cynthia started asking around, figuring out if we could get a meeting room for the evening just for a few hours. And we got some leads, and we only got confirmation that we actually had a space about 2 days beforehand. So we had to do all the planning and stuff. It was kind of scrappy last minute. And then we had another idea. Well, there's a Starbucks right across the street from the conference. Maybe we could recruit people in the booth and go to the Starbucks with them, and then we could observe them using the app in a real situation, because people tend to just use it at Starbucks. They could make a mobile order, and we could see them pick up their drink. That would also be great, maybe about 20 to 30 minutes. So those are the kinds of ideas that we had in mind for how we were thinking about running tests, or rather the environments in which we would run the tests. And then we had a consideration of, well, should we record the sessions? For most of the usability studies that we do normally, we do record the sessions. But these are really short sessions, and we decided we didn't really want to waste time on paperwork for these really short sessions, since we're not recruiting beforehand, and usually participants fill out that paperwork before the session. So we decided not to ask people to sign any agreements, but not doing any consent forms means that we can't record video, we can't record audio. And not doing a non-disclosure agreement means that we can only test stuff that's in the current app or website. We can't test anything that's currently in development. We were kind of torn about this. Videos are a great way to help build empathy amongst the team, And they're also really great at doing analysis afterwards, so that if the moderator forgets to write something down, they can look it up in the video afterwards. But ultimately, we decided that we wanted the test results more than we wanted videos, and asking people for paperwork during the test would eat up a really precious time in which we could be getting really valuable feedback. And then we had the question of, well, who should moderate these studies? There's only one researcher going, and that's me. And it would be unrealistic for me to be everywhere at once, even though I can try to be really fast. So let's make sure that everyone that's attending is able to moderate if and when needed. We don't want to turn anybody away simply because I'm, say, off grabbing lunch right now, or I've taken someone to the store and I'm running another session at the store and someone comes by the booth. We don't want to turn anyone away that can give us feedback. So I ran a crash course on how to moderate studies, how to ask unbiased questions, what to pay attention to, what to take notes on. I was told it was a little bit overwhelming because there was just so much information that I was sharing, but that it also gave them really good things to think about while they were running the studies later. Having anyone moderate, especially people that aren't very familiar with it, did make it a little bit more difficult to analyze the results afterwards. So some notes were less detailed, some things that we were trying to track weren't in the notes, and so forth. But the trade-off was really worth it. It was great for everyone to get firsthand experience and seeing people use assistive technology or accessibility options with our products. And we got a lot more participants this way since I wasn't always available. And then, as I mentioned, we really didn't want to turn anyone away who was willing to give us feedback. So we wanted to plan the tests in a way that was flexible depending upon the person's preferences. So let's give people the choice of whether to use our test phones that we're bringing or to use their own phone, which they have set up for themselves. And if someone's using their phone and they don't have the app installed, which is what we were wanting to test, well, then let's test the mobile website. And if they just installed the app because they're excited about it, we'll have them test things that don't require you to be logged in with an account, like maybe finding a nearby store or account create. And for these studies, we were primarily focused on iPhone and the app for the iPhone, but we were really happy to get feedback about any platform. People could give us feedback about their use of the website, or if they use Android when they come to the booth. Let's test on Android and get feedback about that. Any feedback is good feedback. Ultimately, we identified 11 possible tests for the booth, plus 2 longer tests for the evening session or the store session. And all told, it covered about 8 different features. And all of these tests were focused on core features of the app or the website, or they were on places where we had specific questions related to the accessibility. So we had questions such as, how easily do voiceover users find that there are available actions, which we're using in a few places of the app. And because we were trying to design so much for flexibility, each test had a matrix of requirements for what type of device does it need, ours or theirs? Does it require them to have a Starbucks account? Does it require them to be a certain level in our rewards program? Are we looking for voiceover users for this or someone else? And so this seemed very quickly like it become overwhelming during the booth. So we needed a solution. So you know those choose your own adventure books where you get to make decisions that can take you down different paths and affect the overall story? I tried to make something similar for the session script and note-taking using a Google form. And for anyone unfamiliar, a session script is what a moderator reads from when reading a usability test. It tells you what to say, what questions to ask, and in what order, what exactly the tasks should be. It helps you make sure that you don't forget anything accidentally, and it makes sure that tests are run in the same way every time so that they're easier to analyze and more accurate. So, as is really typical with session scripts, they start with introductions like, hi, my name is Carmen, I work at Starbucks, what's your name? And then some questions such as, do you have the Starbucks app? What do you do with the Starbucks app? Do you want to use your device or our device? And for each question, we also put a field where they could actually enter information, or the moderator could enter information. And all of these introductory questions were then used by the moderator to help them select a test from a list that was also on the form. And then once the test was selected, the survey branched so that they could only see stuff that was related to the task, to the test they selected. And then best of all, once they finished doing the test, the results were uploaded, and anyone on our team could then see it. And this worked really, really, really well for us, but only because we were in a place that had amazing Wi-Fi. If we didn't have good Wi-Fi, this would have sucked. And in fact, in some of the tests that we ran outside of the booth, where I wasn't sure if we would have Wi-Fi, I actually didn't use this survey and instead just used a Word document. So attracting people to the booth, I'll let Cynthia talk to this.
So we talked a lot about what we could do to make this fun and interesting for people, and to attract people to the booth, and to compensate people for their time, even though it's just a little bit of time. And we ended up not giving out pens or t-shirts or cups. We had some of that stuff, but we thought a lot about it, and we were like, what is it that our company has that's unique and special? And it turns out we have coffee, and everybody likes that. And we have lemon cake. And so I want to give a shout out to the Coast Highway Starbucks store, because they were a huge help. They cut up all this cake into these little samples. They kept us supplied with coffee. We cleaned them out of lemon cake, actually. And then for people who did the test, we also had some $5 gift cards. And I don't know if you can see in the picture, but in the picture we have a Braille gift card. So we have, it says Starbucks in Braille. And then we had little samples of lemon cake and coffee, and we had a lot of traffic through this booth. People were very excited both to try our app and to try our wares. Back to you.
Yep. So during the studies, going into this, we had absolutely no idea how many people we would get to participate. We expected we'd have downtime, maybe we'd be able to attend some of the great sessions that are at CSUN. We thought we'd be really happy if we got about 15 to 20 people total. That would be about 5 to 7 a day, and we were like stoked that we might be able to get that many. And so what happened exceeded our wildest dreams. So first, to give you a little bit of context, I'm going to start with a picture of what San Diego looked like while we were there. There was blue skies, no clouds, warm weather. We were right on the waterfront. It was a gorgeous view. It was the perfect weather for just sitting outside, maybe having a drink. And we never got to do this, other than the first day when I took this picture, which was before the conference started, when I was leisurely walking down the waterfront. And we were so busy, we barely even had time to leave the booth to eat. I usually ate like a couple bites at a time between sessions for my lunch. So how did it go? As we mentioned earlier, we did 52 sessions. 45 of them were in the booth, 6 were in the evening, and there was one longer session at the store. We actually were way too swamped to try to do more than that one session at the store. There was just too much activity back to back. And the expo hall where the booth was pretty noisy, and we didn't have a lot of space, but it was definitely worth it just for the sheer number of people that were there and who came by our booth. And everyone was really excited to give us feedback. It was great to see. We were there, we were seeking feedback, and we weren't selling them anything. We had people that were really interested, and they were waiting around to participate, and some of them eventually had to leave because they ran out of time. And so we did end up having to turn some people away just because we were so incredibly swamped. We were at capacity. And we were only set up to run one study at a time, but occasionally we ran 2. But because we were only set up to run 1 at a time, that second study, they had to sit on the floor, sometimes beg an extra chair from another booth so that the participant could sit in a chair. Then the moderator had to be on their knees. So it really wasn't ideal. And one of those times when we actually ran 2 studies at once, it was 2 teenagers who were blind that came by, and they were amazing with using voiceover and technology. And so we can confirm that it's true. Teenagers are amazing at technology. It doesn't matter that you're blind, no difference. And just overall, we were overwhelmed. Everyone was extremely generous with their time, and it was so amazing. And we were incredibly exhausted by the end. And so, but we did it. Now what? We have 52 separate tests to try to start analyzing. And ultimately, what we really wanted to do was try to bottle up our entire experience and all of the learnings and bring it back to the team. So we had a lot of data. And when we came back, we already had a list of some of the top priority things that we wanted to fix, which Cynthia then dove into, and I'll let her speak to that in a minute. And so meanwhile, I dove into diving through all the data, which was pretty dirty. Some people wanted to explore multiple features, which was great, but they weren't always working from the specific task that we had. Some people ran out of time, and so we had to stop them before they did a full task. And both of these were super helpful, and they gave us amazing insights, but it made it in the end a little bit harder to aggregate across people to say like 5 out of 7 did this when only 3 people saw it. But it was still great. And we had multiple moderators, as I mentioned, and they had varying levels of skills, which again made it a little bit harder to compare across participants. And my awesome form for note-taking failed me a little bit, since it was great. I had all of the data, but it put it into a spreadsheet and the columns were not in actual order from what was in the script. So I had to put the tests back together in order. So that took a little bit more time. And then I decided to analyze the features one at a time, and then also be elevating general findings across all features, such as how do people just in general use VoiceOver. And so this also meant that I had new results to share with the team about every week or two, rather than it taking a month and a half to get any information at all. So I was constantly feeding information back to Cynthia and everyone else on the team about what we had seen. And then whenever I had results to share, we had a couple of main goals in mind. We really wanted to build empathy amongst the team members to help everyone understand the experience that we'd had as much as possible, but we hadn't taken any videos, which made it a little bit more difficult to actually truly share the experience. So I had quotes that I had written down from participants, and I shared those, which worked great. And then I decided to record videos of me using VoiceOver, trying to recreate what we had seen and what we had witnessed people doing as much as possible to increase the empathy, and actually having the team hear VoiceOver in a normal experience was amazing. And you could tell everyone it really meant so much to them, and the experience came across so much better with that. And then we also wanted to share with the team, as Cynthia had mentioned earlier, just how people use VoiceOver and what they're listening for. And so that overall our designers, developers, QA, everyone can improve the way that they test for and design for VoiceOver. And we also gave an extra presentation to the entire team about how to use VoiceOver. What is it? What are the gestures? How did we see people trying to use it? Which went really well, and people really appreciated getting that information. And ultimately, we also wanted to educate the team about any issues that we found, whether it was usability issue, an accessibility issue, so that they could get addressed. And I will pass it back to Cynthia to talk about how we've been addressing it.
Great, thank you. So we got so much data. and it took us a long time. It took Carmen a long time to dig through it. I didn't help very much. But as each piece of data came through, I really wanted to integrate it with our existing Agile process and make sure that the whole team knew about the issues. So the first thing that we did was we had some general findings, and some of these were written down and some of them were just our impressions from having been at the conference and talking to so many people. And we spent a bunch of time with our design team, helping them understand those scenarios, reproducing some of the bugs. That was actually a little tricky because we were testing with a released version of the app, and then a new release came out. So we had to go back to an older build to reproduce some of these issues. But I think it was really valuable for the design team to see things, how they actually worked. And the videos definitely helped. And then we did some live reproductions, and we spent some time sort of thinking through how this feedback could influence the designs for features that we were still working on that hadn't actually gone into the builds. And then we found a bunch of bugs. And I'm still doing data entry to get all the bugs in there, but we found a bunch of bugs, and we put the highest priority ones into the queue, and many of those have already been fixed. And it was just great to watch the engineering team jump on those and figure out how to fix them. A lot of them had a big impact and actually weren't that difficult technologically to fix, so we were able to knock off some of that quickly. And then there were a lot of things where it's like, hey, maybe we should redesign this part of this existing feature. And, there's a whole bunch of problems in this area. Let's think about how this area how we might be able to rework some of these issues. So we created some epics and some stories, which have gone into the regular queue and are being prioritized just like anything else, to fix some of those issues and to work on redesigns and to feed that data into ongoing designs. And that's going to keep going. And we're really looking forward to doing some more usability tests in a few months, once we've gotten more of these things actually into the builds, to see how we were able to do and whether we addressed a lot of the issues. And back to you.
Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't be Agile if we weren't reflecting and looking back and seeking to improve what we did. So I'll talk a little bit about what worked and also what didn't work on the next slide. So what worked? There was a lot that really worked really well. So the food and coffee that we had were a huge hit. Everyone loved it. The gift cards that we gave away to participants were really appreciated. And we had so many participants. We were flooded. It was amazing. And there were a lot of people that were also willing to give us their contact info so that we could seek for future feedback. Like once we fix some of these issues, we could have them do another study, maybe a remote study, and figure out how that would work. Not asking people to do paperwork was really a smart move. These were really short studies overall. Even the longer studies were pretty short. So not needing to mess with a recorder and not needing to get all the paperwork done made things so much more streamlined. And sharing the experience with the team worked really well. All of the quotes were really meaningful, and the videos especially were a really great way to communicate what the actual issues that we found were. So that worked really well. And then at the end, I'll give a shout out to Martha Lee. She was only in our booth about half time, but she knows sign language, and so she could serve as a sign language interpreter, which she did for 2 sessions that we ran. And without her, we wouldn't have gotten a whole bunch of really amazing, valuable feedback. And like we could probably benefit from having a sign language interpreter more often in the booth for next time. So what would we change? So 11 tasks in the booth were a little bit, or 11 tests in the booth were a little bit overwhelming. So maybe trying to streamline it a little bit for fewer tasks. The tool that I had for the script and the moderator notes worked super well. But it did make it a little bit harder to analyze just with the way that the results were organized. So I might do a little bit more testing on that as well, that aspect of it. And more moderator training. So maybe identifying a couple of people to be primary backups and giving them a lot more training and how to do it. That could probably be beneficial. But even the amount of training that they had, it still went really well, and it was great. But more booth staff in general. Like we were way understaffed for the amount of interest that we got. So we were swamped. So having the ability to run multiple tests at the same time and actually being set up for that. So we have 2 tables and at least 4 chairs and that sort of thing. But then also having more people staffing the booth could enable like me or another researcher to actually take people to the store, but then still have people moderating in the booth for those sessions. So that would be great. And then for myself personally, having a better prior experience of voiceover going into the study. So I knew a bit about voiceover beforehand, but it was just a little bit. And I learned a lot during these sessions and watching everybody, and it was really great. But and then also afterwards, when I was trying to recreate the videos, I was walking through things, and there were things that people did that they never stumbled upon, they never had any problems with, and so I didn't really capture it or think about writing down how they did what they did. And then later on, when I was trying to recreate the video, I realized I have no idea how people did this, but that's something that had I known that beforehand, I would have been paying attention for, so I'll know for next time. So that's kind of a high level of what we would change and lessons learned kind of thing. And I'll pass it back to Cynthia.
So these are the big ideas that we uncovered while doing this testing. The first one is that designing for accessibility works. All those talks that you hear about pushing, shifting left and moving accessibility into the design process and all of that, the places in our app where we had actually intentionally designed for accessibility did much better. And having the design team thinking about this up front and having the engineering team thinking about this up front made a huge difference. The second is that accessibility APIs work. We were mostly testing on the iPhone, and the iPhone has a robust accessibility API. And while we had done QA testing with VoiceOver, we hadn't done any testing with input devices. And there were two different switch manufacturers who came to our booth, and we're like, well, let's see what happens. So we Bluetooth paired my personal iPhone to these switches and went all the way through the process. I had to stop them before they actually bought coffee with my credit card, but but we were able to go all the way through the purchase process, and it just worked. And that's because Apple has this great API, and by building our app to work with VoiceOver, we had also built it to work with any other assistive technology that leverages that API. So that was great. The next thing is that bugs that seem minor can be really big problems. There was one bug that, again, was pretty easy to fix, but where VoiceOver Focus got stuck in the sort of header of a particular screen on the app, and you had to tap in a different part of a screen to get out of there. And it didn't seem like that big a deal to have to just, well, if you just tap here, then everything works fine. But it was a huge cliff. And that kind of thing can be a big problem. And you uncover that with usability testing way more than you would uncover that with QA testing, because QA testers know how to work around those things, and they can usually see the screen. And so that was really valuable for us. The next thing is that you can learn a lot in a 10-minute study. Even if the user only gets through one task, did they get through the task? Where did they get confused? The users gave us great feedback about the strings we were using, about what it said, not just whether it was technically exposed, where things made sense, where they didn't make sense. We got feedback about, this is a little weird, but I can figure it out, and feedback about, no, that's really weird. And then, as Carmen said, that doing usability testing for accessibility isn't really that different than doing any other usability testing. And all of the information and all of the training that you have about doing usability testing applies here. It's not some big mysterious thing. And the last big idea for all the business people on the line is that doing usability testing at CSUN was extremely cost effective. A CSUN booth is not that expensive, and we were able to get 52 studies in 3 days, and it was amazing and an invaluable experience. It was also exhausting, especially with 4.5 people. We were running all day and eating pizza in the booth, and anybody who's been to CSUN knows that pizza's not that great. But at least we had coffee, and that helped. And then just a couple more big ideas to leave you with. One is that being able to buy your own coffee really matters. It seems like a small thing, but it's not. And then the last thing is that everyone loves our lemon cake, and really, it's great. You should try it. And with that, see if we have any questions.
Hi, that was great. Thank you very much. Just check Twitter. We've got a lot of activity on Twitter, but I don't see any questions. But I have a few actually here. So first off, how does Starbucks prioritize issues it uncovers during usability testing?
So we took the issues and we broke them up into bugs and stories and epics, like you would with any other issue that you ran into. And then it went through the same prioritization process that anything else does. And we talked a lot about, is this just a bug that we can just fix? Or does this require redesign? Is there something tricky about the way this thing is implemented that's going to make it take longer to do that? And once we had all of that information sort of costed out and in our issue tracking system, then they went through the same process that anything else would, which was really about, do we have dev time for this, and does it take one sprint or two, and where can we fit it, and those kinds of things. But I guess the high level is that we treat accessibility just like anything else. It's user interface.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And next question. You talked a bit about sharing the results with the team, and particularly with the designers and developers in the team. It seems that it's quite difficult to share that information from testing sessions broadly when you in large organizations sometimes, and particularly being able to find the information later, so the year after when you're building a new product, for example. Have you done any work on archiving this data, being able to find the results later on, anything like that?
Yeah, so this is Carmen, I'll speak to that. For the UX research team, what we've created just in general for any of our usability findings or other sorts of research that we do, we've created an internal website that has all of the results uploaded. It has tags, it has summaries of the findings, and then it has a link to the full report as well. It might also have links to like additional information, such as like the plan that we used, that if we're doing it again in the future, we can follow the same plan or something similar. It is tagged, so things are findable. Oftentimes it turns out that like we are really familiar with it on the research team, and so other people are like, hey, I was looking for that research, or I wanted to know that research from last year, and we're like, here's a link. Here's everything that you can find. Let us know if you have additional questions. So yeah, so everything's findable and shared amongst everybody internally that has access to the website, which is a lot of people and everyone on our team.
And while Starbucks is a huge organization, our application development team is not that big. So we're able to do a lot of just talking to people, having conversations. Mm-hmm. The designers come to my desk all the time, and we talk through things and do that kind of iterative design process.
Yeah, and I'll speak as the researcher. I'm actually embedded within the design team, and so I'm attending all of the meetings going, hey, I'm working on CSUN, and here's some stuff that I'm finding, and so at that level, so there's a lot of casual conversations about stuff that I was learning or doing, and then we had many different reporting sessions based upon like the specific features that we were reporting on, but then we also did like brown bag sessions about share outs, about how to use voiceover and that kind of thing, and we've offered additional trainings as well. So all that share out.
That's great. Thanks for the answer.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have. I don't see any other questions. Hans, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's really interesting. We will be back in just over 20 minutes with Lenny Feingold, so please join us then. And thank you once again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very interesting. So let's all have a break, have a bit of lemon cake. That's a whole hour.
Yeah, and it was great to be here.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.